Everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider. Hopefully everybody's having a good weekend. We're going to do the broad market and a couple individual names, updating them into the week ahead. And we'll start off with SPY. You can see here on SPY we have a really strong candle on Thursday. Obviously, we weren't trading on Friday. And one thing that I really want to note here, especially about the candle on Wednesday, which was the last trading day of the month, you can see we had this huge wick here. And you know what the raindrops do on TrendSpider, something that's very proprietary to our platform and something that really caught my eye last week, was the fact that if you turn on the raindrop chart, you'll see that there's quite a bit of volume within this wick. So anytime that you have a wick like we saw on the 31st of March, but a lot of that volume is focused and aggregating at the top of the range, that generally tells us that there were some very aggressive buyers coming in. Once those buyers were done, the demand curve was able to shift back, and the price was able to drop into close, not necessarily because huge selling pressure came in, but maybe those buyers, those really aggressive buyers, were done for the day. And we know that they were aggressive buyers because they were absorbing this supply at the top of the range for this particular day. And so we had a nice continuation move up the next day, and just a great way how you can use the hollow candles with the raindrops. Now, if we go to the weekly side of things, you'll see here that we do have the anchored volume by price anchored from the September 21st low. And you can see it, which was just the 2020 low for the fall. And you'll see here that we have this huge area of volume holding here. And as we like to say, these launch pad, these volume shelves like to turn into launch pads a lot of the time, especially as price really confirms that there's clearly demand, but also just a lot of people holding in this general area. So it's a mix of supply and demand. As soon as any supply dries up and we have any type of ignition on the demand side, we usually get a nice move up off that shelf. So going into next week, we're kind of on the blue sky side of things here for SPY hitting new all-time highs. But if you look at the daily side of things, you'll see here that we do have this diagonal resistance that's acted as resistance multiple times over the last several months. And I'm just pointing these out with these arrows. And so you can see here, if we did continue up, we could possibly test this upper resistance above if we really continued up strongly. However, we have pretty much gone straight up over the last 6 days. Do we get a little bit of a pullback first? That will determine where that price area is above. Because remember, if we went straight up on Monday, maybe our target is 408, 409. However, if we move up over the next month and just continue to grind higher, maybe we're closer to the 412 to 415 area, because remember, these trend lines are a function of time. So if you do want to be alerted anytime the price gets to this line or anywhere around it, just right click, create an alert at that line. You can increase or decrease your sensitivity so you don't have to be right on the money. You can have some margin of error, and that's a great way to use the alert system on the platform. Now, going into the Qs, you'll see here that we do have another launch pad forming here, a volume shelf from the September lows. So we're just starting the volume by price from the September lows. What does that mean? We're just essentially showing the distribution of shares since this bottom here, pretty much since this trend reversed back to the upside. And so you can see a lot of shares holding here. We have that same kind of launch pad volume shelf forming here, and price really had a nice move up into the end of the first couple days of April. Now, you can see here on the daily side of things, we do have this ascending triangle. We literally moved right up to it. And this is a question of, do we get a little pullback? We have two gaps below now. However, the markets are looking very strong. We've been consolidating now for about a month. And, there's a lot of cash on the sidelines. So this may be a trigger for markets to really just continue up for maybe a couple weeks. And if we look at the seasonality side of things and look at since the 2016 lows, and pretty much if we look at that on a chart, you'll see here that way back in 2016, this is when we really were struggling for quite a while. We were stuck in this area, and so this was really the pivot here in late January, early February. We bottomed out in August of 2015. That was the big oil crash. And that was when China was having some trouble. But early 2016 is when we really put in that bottom here and really changed things and started this really strong uptrend that we've had now for quite a while. Now, we have had 2018, but if we look at 2018, we only have about 3 years of data to go off of. So I like to go back a little further. That's why we're going back since 2016, since that trend really reversed to the upside. And you can see here that April does have an 83% win rate. So something to keep in mind on the seasonality side as well. Now, moving into the VIX, we generally do IWM, but I don't want to make this video too long, so we'll go in. Actually, let's just do it. We have the raindrops on already, so we can do it real quick. IWM is one that has really moved up nicely. What you can see here is an anchored VWAP from the swing high here. On Thursday, we did break through it and close above, so definitely bulls in control here on the daily side of things. And then on the weekly side of things, if we anchored the volume by price from the September lows, you'll see here that we do have some supply above still. Not exactly the same as what we were seeing on SPY or the Qs. You can see that, I would highlight this orange because initially it's going to act as supply, but a lot of the time this can easily act as a very short-term level of supply until price gets through that area, and it can become an easy launch pad into the month of April. And if you look at the April stats here for seasonality, you can see April does have a 100% win rate over the last 5 years, pretty much since those early 2016 lows. So we have seasonality on our side. We have a decent technical setup. We've kind of been stuck here for now almost 2 months. So it would make sense if we finally started to break out. We may have some FOMO, a lot of cash on the sidelines coming back in. Now, the next one that we'll touch on is VIX. VIX is one that finally filled this gap below. It's about time. We've only been looking at this chart now forever. And another thing about VIX is, every time that we continued to have some volatility in March, we kept hitting lower highs on the VIX. So that definitely told me that, maybe things aren't as bad as they seem. Maybe we're just having some choppiness in the month of March. But if we turn on the gap snake here, you'll see, and the gap snake is just the automated gap detection we have. You'll see here that this gap from the start of COVID for VIX did finally fill last week. So that's definitely something to keep in mind going into the week ahead. VIX dropping like this definitely shows some really bullishness in the market. And you can see here into April, VIX seasonally since 2016 only has a 17% win rate. So the seasonality side is in line with the technicals here. Now, and just to be clear, the VIX is not something you can really do a ton of technical analysis on, but the gap below is something a lot of people were watching, and it finally filled. So from that perspective, that is aligning with this gap fill and the seasonality here. Going into Bitcoin, the last one that we'll touch on for more of a broad market perspective. And this thing just cannot get through this 5.618 extension. We started the measured move from 2019 highs all the way down to the March lows. And you can see here that we've now been stuck for about a month right at this 5.618 extension here on the weekly side of things. If we anchor the volume by price from the swing low here in late January, you'll see here that we are starting to pull back a little bit right into this volume shelf, and this may act as an area for the price to catch a little bit of a bid or just supply to dry up a little bit. If we do break down through this area, we have a volume gap below, meaning there's not a ton of liquidity until we get down to around, let's say, 49,000, 50,000. That's also a psychological point below as well. So seasonality for Bitcoin actually starts decreasing after April. We have an 80% win rate for April since 2016, and you'll see here since that point in time, April is the 80%. Then into August, we continued to incrementally go down from April. So 60% May and June, 40% July, only 20% win rate in August. So something to consider if you are trading Bitcoin and looking at the technicals, but also the seasonality side. Next one is Netflix. Netflix is one of the better examples I've seen in a while of using the volume gap technique. So what I did here was I anchored the volume by price from the earnings high, and you can see here that we had this volume gap here, essentially this area where there just wasn't a ton of liquidity holding here. And notice how quickly the price was able to move up through this area. Within 2 days, we went from around 514, 515 all the way up to 540. And where did we stop? We stopped right at this next area of supply. So remember, if you bought in Netflix too early and you just dealt with a drawdown from 540 all the way down to the high 400s, you get back to break even. You may take a little off the table. You may take all of it off the table. And that's kind of the psychology of how these supply and demand works. We're going to call it break-even supply because a lot of people that had a drawdown are back to break even and may start to exit a little bit of their position, or maybe just they throw in the towel and they move on to something else and take their capital elsewhere. So that's something to consider on the weekly side of things, if we turn off the volume by price, you'll see here that we are finally closing above this symmetrical triangle that's been forming for quite some time. I mean, we really haven't moved since July, meaning we haven't really broken through. We did slightly here in mid-January, but we've been stuck in range bound now for quite some time. And on top of that, April does have a relatively high win rate with 83%. On top of that, just in general, we do have we don't have a huge volume bar, but it was also a short week. But just in general, the fact that we did close through this resistance line is something to definitely keep in mind on the bullish side of things. Google's another one that had a very strong week. Nice breakthrough of this pennant here. Kind of a symmetrical triangle. I wouldn't call a perfect symmetrical triangle, but same thing, broke through it, closed above. If we anchored the volume by price from the swing low in mid-January, or excuse me, late December. So, okay, this is something to bring up. We kind of have almost a double bottom here. So for me, if you anchor it from the January low or the late December low, you're going to see that the volume by price doesn't change a ton. So it's really up to how you use the anchored volume by price. I'm generally doing it from the actual low. In this case, this would be the lowest open, but this is the actual lowest intraday close, or excuse me, intraday move down on December 21st. So either way, if we anchor it from here or anchor it from January 6th, a lot of that volume was holding here. This initially acted as a supply zone. Once the price was able to get through the supply zone, there's our launch pad. And so a nice move up, breakout here on the weekly. And April not as strong as some of the other charts that we're looking at, 67% win rate, but seasonality is not always going to be an end-all be-all here, especially when you have the chart setting up like it is. Next one is Amazon. Amazon is one that is really going to be interesting into the weeks ahead because we are moving right into this supply zone here. So if we anchor the volume by price from the lows, COVID lows, you'll see here that we did move up right to this area above. There's some shares now pretty much holding right at break even. If we can get some of that supply to dry up, this could look very similar to Google as we just looked at. Initially, this acts as supply, then it becomes a launch pad for price. Next one here is the daily side of things, and you can see that if we do turn on the automated gap detection, the gap snake, we do have this gap above. Let's say that your target above was the gap. Remember, you can go in, right-click, create an alert at this line. If you just want to be alerted right when the price breaks through, use the breakthrough here. If you want to be alerted anytime the price gets anywhere around this area, you can use the sensitivity feature with the touch trigger here. So a lot of different ways you can use the alert system, whether that's on gaps, whether that's on horizontal lines, diagonal lines. There's a lot of things you can do and save time using the alert system. Going on to Apple. Apple is one that definitely has some work to do. As we can see with the gap snake, we do have a gap above way around 132. If we anchor the volume by price from the swing low here, you can see that the price is really stabilized at this area of volume here, what we'll call a volume shelf. And so this could act as an area for price to move up off, a nice base for price, if you will. But the one thing about April, at least for Apple, is we only have a 50% win rate. So something to keep in mind, it's not as bullish of a month as some of these other names that we went over. But as I mentioned, this is something you want to use with the technicals as well, not just looking at seasonality saying, oh, there's only a 50% chance. You have to look at the other variables as well. So that is something to keep in mind, but also keep in mind the broad markets have very strong seasonality into April. So that may help Apple as well. Going into the last one, SKLZ. This is one a lot of people are watching right now. The one thing that I'll mention here is we do have this very not incredibly narrow falling wedge here. So you can see here that, this does extend for quite a while. Who knows? Maybe we could do one of these, pull back, that. I mean, there's a lot of room for this to still stay in this pattern. However, you can see that we are starting to look interesting on the weekly side of things with this almost perfect doji. And if we anchor from the anchored volume by price from the swing high, you'll see we have that volume gap above. So if the price can really start to move through this area above, there's not a ton of liquidity up here. So this could possibly move pretty quickly from around, let's say, 1875 all the way up to 23, 2350, just due to that lack of liquidity. then we hit this next area of supply above. So something to consider on SKLZ. The best way to do this, maybe you just want to play either the breakdown or the breakout. You can right click both of these trend lines, simply just do the breakthrough. Whenever the price breaks through and you close, let's say the 10-minute candle closes below, you'll get an alert. Let's do it for 15 days, 16 days, whatever, and then create the alert. You do the same thing on the other side, create alert, breakthrough. Whenever the 10-minute candle breaks through this line, and remember, if we're just looking for a breakthrough, we don't really need that sensitivity. That's only for the touch. And then we can go in, click 15 days have passed. That's when the alert will expire. And then you don't have to guess which way price is going to go. Just let price action do its thing. And when you get the alert, you know, maybe it's time to go short. Maybe it's time to go long. Maybe it's time to sell your position if we get up and break through. There's so many different ways to trade. Everyone's going to use these alerts slightly differently. So that is SKLZ. Broad market update in general. Hopefully this was useful. If you guys enjoy these videos, make sure to like and subscribe. We do our Sunday show on our YouTube channel as well. We are taking a little bit of a break, but we'll be back in a couple weeks. So this is where we do host the Sunday shows, so you'll be able to turn on your notifications and get that when we do premiere those shows. And yeah, if you have any questions about the platform, you can always reach out to us through our Twitter DMs or through hello@trendspider.com at our customer success department. And we're always happy to walk you through. We have a one-on-one demo for new users and someone that hasn't had a one-on-one demo. We're happy to give you one if you do have a couple questions. So there's a lot of different ways you can get help using the platform, so you're not just using it blindly and you don't really know how to use it. We want to make sure that our users know how to use the platform and that they're utilizing it to their full capability. So hopefully everybody has a great holiday weekend for those that are celebrating the holiday, and here's to a great April.